My name is Sheila Taylor, and this is where my story meets his. I'm married to Greg Taylor. We have two boys. Sam is a junior at UNL, Josh is a freshman at UNL. So we are free birds, not empty nesters, free birds. And Greg, works at Abante, and we do all the gear, and I get to volunteer my time. I am involved with Stephen Ministry, just big into the caring ministry at Grace Hill, and we get to walk alongside people as they're journeying through their struggles and hurts, and it's a great privilege and joy to do it. It's like you want to be the person that you needed as you were maybe going through your own stuff, and so it gives me an opportunity to do that. And going back in my childhood, my mom had cancer, died when I was 13, and few years of doctor appointments and chemo, and just kind of walking through all of that as a family. And then when she died, it was like, oh wow, we live in a small town. I don't know anybody whose parents have died. I don't even know anybody whose parents are divorced. I mean, small town, go to church and do your thing. And I just felt so different. I think I felt like, who's like me now? And where do you belong? Where do you fit in? And, at the time, my dad was a teacher at the middle school, and he was friends with like our counselor and all the teachers and everything. And so I didn't really feel like I could talk to them because my dad, and it was just a weird dynamic. It happened over Christmas. And so, my mom died, and then we went back to school after break, and it was like, okay, business as usual. And it's like I kind of wanted to wear a sign that was like, hey, my mom died. Anybody, care or know or whatever. And so it was 13. I didn't process it. I didn't really go through that grief journey and do the work. And so it just impacted the rest of, gosh, until like through my 20s. It's kind of a mess. And it's just funny how people walk in your life in different chapters. And so I feel like the people of Grace Hill see, Greg and I at the point we are now and the life we get. And it's like, it's so great. And it is. And, it's wonderful. And God has done so much. We've had so much grace in our life. And so, but if you would have walked into my story, in my upper teens, my 20s, completely different. I would say I processed the grief not well. And at the time I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. Like I said, we went to church. I grew up in the faith. And so I'd like to think that I would turn to that, but I didn't. Jesus wasn't so personal to me then. He was the Father, and, kind of feared him in a negative way instead of the way we're called to fear him and be in awe of him. And it was different back then too. It's not like you really talked about your feelings or went to therapy, or, how now I feel like it's just so much more prevalent and open. People are open about it. And, back then, my dad's motto was always like, work hard and believe in God and you'll be good. And so that's what we did. I don't even know if or how he really did process it. I'm sure, he's a very faithful man, and I'm sure he just took it to the Lord. But I don't know that for a fact. He had his own story and his own issues and his own things. And so I think that was also hard because, I didn't want to disappoint him either. So I kind of felt a pressure, I think, to make it okay for him. Because at the time, I'm the youngest of four, and my three older siblings were out of the house. And so it was just my dad and I. And so I think I felt this responsibility, which I put on myself, and to just make sure he was okay. And he felt, fine. And neither one of us were, but, we didn't really address it. So, and he didn't know how, again, it's like you have so much compassion. I think that's, when people talk about grief and loss and, there's so much pain and hurt and sorrow, but through loss, you gain so much, and just the perspective you get. And I mean, I feel blessed, like at a young age, it was like, oh, this life could just be taken and, it's short. And so you want to do what matters. You want to live in such a way that makes a difference. I don't think I would have had that perspective had I not gone through that. I became much more compassionate for people and the things that they go through. And I mean, that led me on my life purpose. I feel like, the path that God had set before me. And so, I mean, you're thankful for those things too, as hard as that is. And you can say that in hindsight, at the time, of course, no, I would have given anything for it to be different. But he put so many people in my path too, that, I would have never probably been close to any other way, but it's like he always provided. I mean, the whole thread of God is faithful. It's like when I looked back, it's like I saw, oh, you put that person in my path, that person in my path, and that got me through to the next layer or level of healing or whatever it was. And it was just like, whether through church or neighborhood or college roommates or, whatever it was like, wow, you knew what I needed when I needed it, and he provided. So my dad got remarried a year and a few months after my mom died, and, blended family and whatnot. And so it was just, I didn't really want that. Like, I wanted that for him, but I didn't really want that for me. And so I was kind of happy to leave, and I went to UNI, Teachers College, and because I wanted to be a teacher, it's like I wanted to be a school counselor. I knew that. But back then you had to teach for 2 years before you could become a counselor. So that's what I did. I went to UNI and got my LEd degree, and then taught for 2 years, and then went to Iowa State and got my master's in counseling. So, and in all of that, I, going back to, I said I was look for love in all the wrong places. I had a high school boyfriend, and we were off and on all through college because I kind of hung on to that one for way too long. But, I wanted to get a job where he was going to school, and God protected me. That didn't work out. And so then came back and got a job like back at home, which that was like the last place I wanted to be, but it was the only job I could get. And I ended up meeting someone who had also been through grief and loss, and his brother had died. And so basically it was two unhealthy people who had not dealt with grief and loss, getting together and clinging on to each other instead of to Jesus. And it was a mess, a hot mess. And so that lasted like 5 years. We were married, had all the junk. I became a school counselor, and it was kind of through at that time too, which is so embarrassing. I mean, I think back to that time, and I think, all through high school, I was a good girl. I got good grades, was involved in everything, all the stuff. And but then I get married and divorced, and it's like, oh, great, I got an F at the one thing that truly matters, and so to do that in front of, like, at the time I was in an elementary school with like 600 families, or kids, with families, and it's like my name changed 3 times, and I mean, you just go through the humility of that, how God sometimes just lets you crash and burn, and I needed it. I mean, it's so interesting how God worked through all of that too. And, I think back and thinking of the people he puts in your path, and my office was set between 2 Joys, and that was their names. And it was just like, this is so and they helped me so much through that season of my life. And interesting side note too, like Joy's husband, Mark, is the PFA head. And, now Greg is doing the prison ministry. And so it's just like how your life comes full circle, and how God puts people in there to walk with you, and you don't even know what that's going to mean down the road, and what he's doing, how he's working, in the unseen. So, and then when all that happened, I went to like a small country church at the time, and my pastor there was like, "Hey, I think you could use some extra help." And two things that really I think stood out to me at that time is the one thing, he brought me into his office and he's like, "Have you prayed for your ex-husband?" And I was like, "Oh no." It's like, you don't know all the things he did and all the, the mess of it. And he's like, "Nope, let's pray for him." And I was like, "Oh boy, okay." And then he sent me to this like intensive weekend thing. And you know how sometimes you say yes and you don't even know what you're saying yes to, and you get there and you're like, I thought I was supposed to go through my divorce and all this stuff. But really it was like everything up until that point. Like I just got to grieve and process and sit in it. How it's so hard to sit in your mess and then to do the work to move forward. Yeah. But I was given that space to do that. And I could tell you all the ways God just like showed up throughout that whole messy season. I mean, from going through the divorce and not really having a place to live, and sitting at my favorite bagel place with my girlfriend, and we're sitting there talking, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to live. Like I got to get out, and I don't know where I'm going to go. And in walks this other gal who I had known from school. And she's like, "Hey, you work at the elementary school, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Will you put this up at the bulletin board?" Because back then we didn't have, social media in all the ways. And it was like, needed, roommate, call me, and I was like, and I just bust out bawling. I was like, I looked at my friend and I was like, I'm going to call her tonight. Like she walked out and I called her like within an hour, and she's like, "Yeah, come live with me." And I mean, she's still one of my dearest friends, and, is someone who's helped me so much in my faith walk and everything. But I mean, so many moments like that where God just is like, here you go. I'm going to bring someone from the past and plant them right there, and they're there for you. I mean, I was short on cash too. And a guy that lived across the street from me, I mean, his family was like my second family, and still to this day I'm really good friends, with the daughter. And I opened my door one day and there's like this daily hope book, all full of God's scripture, and in different pages were $100 bills. And it was just like, you have to trust. I mean, God is just so for you. And I don't know, I love being able to tell other people that, and to give them hope and love them where they're at. Because there were so many things during that time. I mean, another one of the God moments, I mean, my ex had anger issues and, addiction and violence and just all of that. And so things kind of turned abusive. And there was one night when I had to call the police, and at the door is the school liaison officer who I had worked with and known for years, because he and I worked together with some families and different things. And it was again, like God's giving you a friendly face, someone who knows you, someone who believes you, someone who, and it was just, I mean, thing after thing, and I couldn't deny it. It was like, okay, you're here, you're with me, and you're going to walk me through this, There was a lot of shame involved too, I mean, of course, the shame and the guilt and the decisions and my own sin and my own things, of course. Greg and I met blind date. I worked with a girl that he worked with her spouse, and she just came up to me and said, "How do you feel about blind dates?" And I was like, let me see a picture. And, and so I saw the picture and I was like, well, yeah, you can give him my number, And so she did. And I said, if he wants to call me, I'm house sitting for a while. So I knew I couldn't see him anyway, like for a few weeks. So he called, and I loved it because back then we had answering machines too. I'm aging myself. And he left a message. I didn't answer, and left a message and said, hi, this is Greg, da da da, I got your number. And then he kind of, I don't know, he lost his train of thought, and he's like, I feel like such an idiot. I don't even know what I'm doing. And right then I was like, oh, I like this guy. He's real. Like, he's not afraid to just be himself. And so I called him, and then we talked on the phone for 3 weeks before we met every night. And we met up, and we just both knew, I think, immediately. I mean, we got married quickly, like 6 months after we met. He's a pretty great guy. I think when you go through things, they're a part of you. So you carry them with you wherever you go. You are wherever you go. So all the issues, all the crap, you just, it goes with you. So we both brought in our own baggage and our own junk, and, but of course you just think it's all going to work out. And it does. I mean, it really, I mean, we both had done our own work prior as well. And so that definitely helped. But we had a moment just with our faith walks that, was kind of a determining factor. He's like, he grew up Catholic, and they didn't go to church after he was in 6th grade. And so I was like, my faith is super important to me, and I know God has carried me through to this point, and I am not going to let him down again. Like, I already did that once, even though we always do. I mean, that's impossible. But just as much as it depended on me, I was like, okay, I want to do this right. I don't want to mess up. And I'm like, if your faith isn't strong or where it needs to be at, I don't know. And he's like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure. And I said, well, just maybe come to church with me. And I gave him a Bible on Friendship Sunday, which is just funny because, when you've grown up in the church, you kind of know these little moments. And he came to church with me, and our pastor showed a Star Trek video for part of his sermon message. And Greg was like, we walked out, and he goes, what? You can watch movies at church? Like, I'm in. And I mean, he just took off. I mean, you guys see him now, and it's like, wow. I mean, it's unreal how much he's grown and how much we've grown together in that. Well, I think when you ask how it impacted us, I mean, obviously because of my issues and what I had been through, trust was kind of hard to come by, and I self-protected. He still will say to me sometimes, like, you're guarding your heart, like, you're really guarding your heart. And I'm like, I know, it's just part of how I'm wired now. I feel like, it's definitely gotten better. I mean, and he calls it out when he sees it, and I need that. But and he, his situation was different, and his is like trust issues too, of loyalty, like being loyal. And it's like, so yeah, when there's situations that come up, or when you feel like trust has been broken or whatever it is, it's like we can go from 0 to 100 pretty quick because old things are getting triggered. And but then just to recognize that we don't have to be those people anymore. You're not my ex, I'm not your ex, we're new creations. And yeah, it's just, but yeah, you can't help but bring some of that past stuff into the present, because no one wants people to know all the thing. It's like, it's embarrassing. But yet, if you don't share that stuff, you don't get to share what God's done and the grace that you've been given. And I mean, that's the gospel. It's like we're walking gospels, all of us. I mean, we all have a story. We've all been met by God's goodness and grace. And it's all for his glory. So I guess if we don't share, we're not stewarding our stories well, and we're not honestly proclaiming what he's done. And so I mean, when you asked me to do this, I didn't want to do it. I hate talking about myself. I don't like my story. There's a lot of chapters I wish I could just rip out, throw away. And, you feel like sometimes I've led 10 lives already. I don't know, like to the point of sometimes I don't even know who that girl was but it's all me, and God loves all of it. And that's so hard to imagine, but when you grasp that and you believe it, I think Pastor Justin has said that so many times, it's one thing to believe it with your head, but you got to live it out. And if I don't share, you don't know. And so I would say that to everybody, like, we need to be a family who are honest with each other, with what we're going through, with where we're at, the hard stuff, the good stuff, all of the stuff in between. It all matters, and nothing's too trivial, nothing's too big, nothing. It's just God is greater than all of it. And so just come as you are. You know how we say that all the time, and it's true. And I want people to feel comfortable and at home, that you can kick off your shoe, like, be truly who you are, and not worry that how that's going to be perceived, or that's just met with grace and love and care and concern and genuineness. And you can't heal what you don't face. And I think so many people have such a hard time facing their true self, and it's like, don't be scared. Yeah, I just don't fear. How many times, do we hear that? And it's just, you want people to feel courageous enough to be able to bring it to you, and I think that is the privilege and joy of serving in the way that I get to on the care team, because people will share their things with you, and wow, what an honor. And to walk with people through that, and to just be a small little blip in their story of maybe getting them to the next level of healing, or, whatever it is, just keeping them on that narrow path that we've talked about. And then you get to witness God doing miracles and showing up. And it's just the coolest thing. And it's still hard. It's still hard. You can know him, and it's still, struggle. And I think that's the thing too, like, we're more alike than we're different. And so I think people just need to remember that too. We're all humans. We all go through things, and no one does it perfectly. And, just cling to God, keep going back to the cross. It's the basics. It's like simple, but it's not simplistic always. It's just keep holding his hand on your faith walk. It's a journey. Everything's a process. It takes longer than you want. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. All those things. It's true for all of us. Nobody can escape that journey. I don't know. Yeah, it's there. It's so there. I didn't ask for help, but I didn't even know what I needed. It's like, we all need Jesus, yes, but I didn't know how to get closer to him. I didn't know how to do that. Like, I don't know. It just happened over time. Like, it wasn't like one person. It just, thing after thing after thing built upon the rock, and it's like, oh, okay. Here we are. Thanks, God. Thanks for getting me here. Right, but thanks. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think too, like, when you think about your life as a whole, and I think about different Bible verses that have been maybe spoken over me or meaningful to me, and like, sometimes you don't even know how that verse is going to play into your life later too. And like, my confirmation verse was Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace, you've been saved through faith. It's not your own doing, it's a gift. And it was like, okay, it's a gift. Like, there's grace. And And that was my life, grace upon grace upon grace. I mean, until I reached 30, I just feel like God's grace got me there. And then when I did Stephen ministry at Divine Shepherd, where it started, and Pastor Mark gave a blessing, and he just picks them from the Holy Spirit, and it was 2 Corinthians 5, like, you're a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. And I was like, okay, I'm walking in that, and it was kind of like a mark in the sand of, and then it was just how, later on, then like Isaiah 61, how Pastor Justin talks about that, like proclaiming the good news. And so funny that this morning, that was my verse. And I was like, I love it that I'm supposed to do this today. And you're putting that verse right in front of me again, like, this is the time, like, it's right. And it's just, I love how God works. I love him. I love it all. Like, and I love church, and I love our the family atmosphere there. And I want people to know they don't have to walk alone through anything, and we're here for them. We have a Bible study teacher who said, where you stare, you steer. And it's like, yeah, fix your eyes on Jesus. I mean, how many times in the Bible, set your mind on things above? It's just constantly pointing us to Jesus and to the cross. And that's what we have to do for each other, is constantly point each other to Jesus. I mean, he's the solution. He's the author of our stories. He's the creator, the sustainer. It's just like the fulfillment of everything. And so thinking of songs too, like, I love music. And I think everyone kind of has a soundtrack to their life too. So it's like, whether it's Bible verses or songs or whatever that God puts there, he's always at work. So I love the whole, just seeing beyond, kind of what you were talking about, seeing beyond what you can see, and not just focusing on what's right in front of you always, but looking for more of him and his beauty. And it's funny, when I taught kindergarten, there was the book Going on a Bear Hunt, and I read it to the kids, and I just remember the line of, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you gotta go through it. And that just rang true. Then, fast forward, it's like going through all the things they went through. You can't go over it, you can't go under it, you gotta go right through it. And so I think too about just when I was an organizer, I was a residential organizer for a period of about 5 years in there too. And that was my motto. You got to go through it. Your junk, your stuff, whether that's, internal in your house, your body, you have to do the inside, heal from the inside out type of thing. You got to go through it. Or whether that's your house and your stuff. And, and people would always like get all nervous when I'd say, okay, take everything out and just put it on the bed or whatever, and they're like, what? I can't just like rearrange it, or just, no, clear it out, clean house, get rid of it. Let's start over, and let's put only back in the things that matter, and so I guess it's just funny how I didn't even know that was kind of how I approach things. And it was out of a kid's book, and God can work through anything.